There's a moment that comes to all of us. A moment when we feel the weight of possibility pressing against the edge of our comfort zone. It's not loud, it's not dramatic, it doesn't come with fireworks or alarms. It often arrives in silence, sometimes in the middle of the night, sometimes while sitting in traffic, or staring out a window, or listening to a voice that keeps asking, "Is this all there is?" These are the moments of decision. And whether we recognize them in real time or only in hindsight, they are the moments that shape everything that comes after. In life, we are given countless opportunities. Not all of them are obvious. Some are disguised as problems, some as challenges, and some as whispers we almost ignore. But what separates those who grow, lead, and impact the world from those who stay stuck is the ability to recognize those moments for what they are, turning points. We like to think big changes come from big events, but the truth is, they often begin in small decisions. The decision to speak up. The decision to try something new. The decision to finally stop pretending you're okay with the way things are. That one phone call you've been putting off. That one application you've been afraid to submit. That one conversation you've been avoiding. These aren't just actions. They're choices that redirect the course of your life. We are always one decision away from a different reality. One yes away from an open door. One step away from a completely new trajectory. That's the power of a decision. It may feel small in the moment, but it becomes the thread that pulls everything else into motion. A new job, a new relationship, a new mission, a new way of seeing yourself. The irony is, most of us don't struggle with knowing what we want. We struggle with the moment we have to choose it. We hesitate, we wait for permission, we seek approval, we tell ourselves we need more time, more information, more security. But in doing so, we often miss the moment when the opportunity is right there within reach. Because decisions, like time, don't wait, they pass. And with them, so do the possibilities they carry. Think about a time in your life when you made a bold decision, something that scared you, something that felt uncertain. Maybe you didn't even know if it was the right call, but you made it. And looking back, you realize how that single choice shifted everything. You grew because of it. You gained perspective. You moved forward. That's what these moments do. They grow us. But the opposite is true as well. Think about the moments when you stayed silent, when you talked yourself out of it. When you watched the window close because you couldn't bring yourself to move. That's not failure. That's human. But those are also the moments that teach us what hesitation costs. Every time we ignore the decision in front of us, we reinforce the walls around us. We let fear win. We let comfort decide our direction. What if instead of waiting to feel brave, we simply chose to be present? What if we learned to recognize those moments for what they are? Not just forks in the road, but invitations to change, to lead, to live, to live. Moments like these don't come with guarantees, but they come with the possibility of transformation. And if we're paying attention, we'll start to see them more clearly. Not as pressure, but as potential. Not as danger, but as a doorway. Fear is a natural part of the human experience. It's the voice that whispers caution when we're about to step into the unknown. It's the instinct that tells us to pause, to wait, to protect ourselves. But fear has a subtle way of convincing us that waiting is wise, that delay is safety, and that hesitation is a form of intelligence. What it doesn't tell us is that in that space between intention and action, it begins to grow. The longer we delay, the louder fear becomes. The more we wait, the more it takes hold. Fear doesn't just live in the moments before a decision. It thrives in our indecision. We like to believe that with more time, fear will shrink. That if we wait just a little longer, we'll feel more ready, more prepared, more certain. But fear doesn't fade with time. It multiplies. It feeds on the stories we tell ourselves in the dark. Stories of what could go wrong, of what others might think, of what we might lose. And with every passing day, those stories become harder to challenge. They start to sound like truth. They start to feel like reality. Delay gives fear space to build walls. And those walls, once built, are hard to break through. What started as a hesitation becomes a pattern. We put things off. We play small. We tell ourselves we'll do it when we're more confident, when the timing is perfect, when we're ready. But readiness is rarely a feeling that arrives before the leap. Confidence comes after the move, not before it. It's born in motion, not in stillness. The more we delay, the more we give fear a seat at the table. We consult it like an advisor. We let it weigh in on our plans, our goals, our dreams. Fritzes, it tells us to be cautious, to avoid risk, to keep things predictable. But fear doesn't care about growth. It doesn't care about purpose. It only cares about safety. And safety, while necessary in survival, can be the enemy of significance. We weren't made just to survive. We were made to create, to build, to lead, to live fully. And that requires a willingness to act, even when we're uncertain. Action is the antidote to fear. It interrupts the loop. It breaks the cycle of overthinking, of procrastination, of self-doubt. When we move, even in small steps, we begin to change the narrative. We collect evidence that we are capable, that we can handle discomfort, that we can do hard things. And with every action, fear begins to lose its grip. It doesn't disappear, but it no longer controls the story. There is a reason the first step is always the hardest. It's the one that demands the most faith, the most courage. It's the moment we have to choose something different. But that first step is also the most powerful because it sets everything else into motion. It opens the door to progress. It allows us to see what's possible on the other side of fear. We often wait for fear to go away before we move. But what if we moved with it? What if we learned to act, not in the absence of fear, but alongside it? That's where real growth begins. Not when we feel fearless, but when we refuse to let fear be the reason we stay stuck. Courage isn't loud, it's not always dramatic. Sometimes it's quiet, sometimes it's a whisper that says, but do it anyway. Fear loves delay because delay keeps us exactly where we are. It tricks us into believing we have time, that the opportunity will come again, that we can wait just a little longer. But every time we delay, we reinforce the power fear holds over us. And every time we act, we take some of that power back. We often think clarity comes from thinking harder, planning more, or analyzing every possible outcome before we act. We believe that if we just sit with a problem long enough, eventually a perfect solution will rise to the surface, fully formed and risk-free. But the truth is, clarity doesn't arrive in stillness. It arrives in motion. It reveals itself not in perfect conditions, but in progress. We don't think our way into certainty. We act our way into it. When we're stuck in indecision, it's rarely because we don't know what we want. More often, it's because we're afraid of choosing wrong. So we stay frozen, trying to solve the entire path before taking a single step. We want every detail to be known, every risk to be accounted for, every question answered. But life doesn't work like that. Most of the answers we're searching for only come after we begin. Clarity isn't the requirement for movement, it's the result. Think about the first time you tried something new. You probably weren't sure what you were doing. Maybe you second-guessed yourself, made mistakes, felt awkward or unsure. But over time, as you kept showing up, it started to make more sense. You learned. You adapted. You saw things differently than you did at the beginning. That's how it works. The more we engage, the clearer things become. It's like fog lifting as we walk forward. From a distance, everything seems unclear, but the closer we get, the more the path reveals itself. Waiting for clarity before we act is like waiting for sunlight in a room with the curtains drawn. You have to open the window first. You have to let something in. You have to create movement. That movement doesn't need to be perfect or huge or impressive. It just needs to start, because the first step isn't about direction, it's about intention. It tells the world and yourself that you're willing to move, to engage, to participate in your own process. There's a kind of wisdom that only shows up after we've made a decision. Before we commit, everything is theoretical. Every option looks equally possible, equally risky, equally uncertain. But once we choose, we begin to see the landscape differently. We notice what works. We learn what doesn't. We discover what truly matters to us, not based on what we imagined, but based on what we've experienced. That's the kind of clarity that can't be found in contemplation alone. Taking action also builds confidence. Every time we move, we prove to ourselves that we can, that we don't need to have it all figured out to make progress. That uncertainty isn't a barrier. It's part of the journey. And as we move, we build resilience. We learn to trust ourselves. We stop waiting for perfect timing and start creating momentum. And in that momentum, we find direction. There's a difference between thinking and overthinking. Thinking helps us prepare. Overthinking keeps us stuck. It's often driven by fear of making a mistake, of being judged, of failing. But the only way to escape the loop of overthinking is to disrupt it with action. One small step is enough to shift the energy. One call, one conversation, one decision. These moments of movement start to break the fog. They open doors we didn't see before. They create feedback we can use to adjust, to grow, to refine. Clarity isn't a destination we reach. It's a rhythm we build. A rhythm of trying, learning, adjusting, and trying again. Each step gives us more insight, more information, more perspective. We don't become clear by waiting. We become clear by doing, by engaging with life, instead of observing it from the sidelines. Ideas are everywhere. They come to us in the shower, during a conversation, in the quiet moments before sleep. We carry notebooks filled with thoughts, dreams, and plans. We talk about them with friends, we sketch them out. We imagine what life could look like if they became real. But the world doesn't change because of what's imagined. It changes because of what's done. The gap between a good idea and a real result is execution. And that gap is where most people stop. There's a belief that having a great idea is enough, that being inspired or visionary is what sets successful people apart. But ideas without action are just potential. They sit untouched, losing energy over time. We admire those who built something big and assume it must have started with a groundbreaking concept. But more often, it started with something simple, followed by consistent, often messy action. What made the difference wasn't the uniqueness of the idea. It was the willingness to execute it. Execution is where reality lives. It's where creativity meets discipline. It's where you take that thing in your head and start making it real step by step. And in that process, things shift. The idea changes shape. You encounter challenges you didn't anticipate. You realize what works and what doesn't. None of that can happen in theory. The only way to refine, improve, and evolve an idea is by doing the work. Talking about it isn't enough. Thinking about it isn't enough. The only way forward is through action. Many people wait for the perfect time to execute. They wait for the right resources, the right support, the right mood. But execution doesn't require perfection. It requires commitment. Most successful ventures didn't begin with everything in place. They began with someone starting where they were, using what they had and figuring it out as they went. The path revealed itself not because they waited, but because they moved. There's a vulnerability in execution. When something exists only in your mind, it's safe. It can't be judged, criticized, or rejected. But the moment you put it out into the world, it becomes real, and real things can fail. And real things can fail. That fear is what stops many people. But it's also what makes execution meaningful. It requires courage, it requires resilience, and it requires the humility to know that done is better than perfect. We often overestimate the value of brilliance and underestimate the power of follow-through. It's not about who has the best idea. It's about who is willing to stick with it when it gets hard, when it's boring, when it's uncertain. Consistency beats intensity. Showing up every day, doing the work, improving over time, that's what builds something that lasts. Execution turns vision into results. It creates impact, not just intention. Ideas are easy to celebrate. They're exciting. They're inspiring. But execution is quiet. It's early mornings, late nights, difficult decisions, and setbacks no one else sees. It's the part most people skip over. But it's the part that matters most, because the only way to bring something to life is to move it from concept to reality. And reality requires effort. When we look at people who've made a difference, we often focus on their ideas. But behind every success is a long trail of consistent execution. The meetings they showed up for, the drafts they rewrote, the failures they learned from, the days they kept going when no one was watching. That's where progress happens. That's where momentum builds. And that's what separates the dreamers from the doers. We grew up learning to ask for permission at home, at school, in the workplace. We're taught to wait until someone says it's okay. Okay to speak up. Okay to try something different. Okay to take a risk. And somewhere along the way, that conditioning starts to shape how we see the world. We stop believing we need someone else to validate our ideas, our desires, our decisions. We wait for approval before we move forward. But the truth is, most of the time, no one is going to give us that permission. No one is going to give us that permission. We have to decide to give it to ourselves. There's this quiet belief many people carry that before they make a change, before they step into something bold, they need a sign. They need someone to tell them it's time, that they're good enough, that they're ready. good enough, that they're ready. But waiting for that sign often means staying stuck, because the permission we're hoping for usually never comes. No one knows your vision better than you. No one feels your calling the way you do, and that means no one is more qualified to choose than you are. People will have opinions. They'll have expectations. They'll project their own fears, their own limitations, their own experiences. If you rely on their green light, you'll spend your life driving in circles, because their permission isn't rooted in your truth. It's rooted in their own lens. And that lens might not be aligned with where you're meant to go. If you wait for them to get it, to support it, to celebrate it, you might be waiting forever. You don't need to be chosen. You can choose yourself. That's where power begins. Not in being selected by someone else, but in deciding that you're done waiting, that you're done playing small, that you're done asking for validation from people who aren't living your life. When you decide that your voice matters, your vision matters, and your time matters, everything changes. Not because someone gave you permission, but because you stopped needing it. There is a strength in ownership. When you take full responsibility for your choices, you stop outsourcing your future. You stop blaming circumstances. You stop pointing to what others did or didn't do. And that shift from waiting to owning is what separates those who lead from those who follow. It's not about ego. It's about accountability. It's about being the kind of person who acts instead of hesitates, who builds instead of waits. Permission is a construct. It's a learned behavior. And like anything learned, it can be unlearned. You can retrain yourself to recognize when you're holding back simply because you're afraid someone might not agree. You can notice when you're shrinking to make others comfortable. And in those moments, you can choose differently. You can choose to take up space, to speak up, to launch, to move. You don't need to have all the answers. You don't need a perfect plan. You just need to decide that your life is yours to lead. And that decision, while it might seem small, is one of the most powerful you can make. Because once you stop waiting, you start creating. Once you stop asking, you start building. And once you stop needing permission, you become unstoppable. You won't always feel ready. Doubt will still visit. Fear will still whisper. But you don't have to wait until those voices go silent. You can move anyway. You can write the story instead of waiting to be written into someone else's. You can be the one who says yes, even when no one else is clapping, even when no one else understands, even when it feels like no one else is watching. Fifth, there comes a point when the question isn't about ability, resources, or timing. It's about responsibility. The voice inside that says something needs to change, something needs to be done, something needs to be said. That voice doesn't appear randomly. It shows up because something within you knows the moment matters. And in that moment, the real question becomes simple. If not now, when? If not you, who? We spend so much time looking around, waiting for someone else to take the lead. We assume someone more qualified will speak up. Someone with more experience will step forward. Someone with more influence will take the risk. But leadership doesn't start with position. It starts with decision. And often the people we think are supposed to go first are waiting for someone just like us to do it instead. We tell ourselves stories to justify the delay, that we're not ready, that we don't know enough yet, that the moment isn't right. But rarely does the perfect moment present itself. Clarity comes when we act. Confidence builds when we try. The longer we hesitate, the heavier the moment becomes. The harder it gets to take that first step. The more we convince ourselves that it's someone else's job. But no one is more connected to the thing calling you than you are. That idea that won't leave you alone. That problem you can't stop thinking about. That change you wish you could make. That isn't an accident. That's an invitation. And it doesn't go away because someone else didn't act. It goes away when we ignore it long enough to forget what it felt like to care. Change doesn't start with committees. It doesn't wait for consensus. It begins when one person chooses to say yes. To show up. To raise their hand. To take ownership. Every movement, every innovation, every meaningful shift in culture or business or society started because someone somewhere decided not to wait. They looked around, saw what was missing, and chose to become part of the solution. Not because they had to, but because they believed they could. There's a discomfort that comes with stepping into that space. You feel exposed, unqualified, alone. But the moment you do, something changes. Others start to see what's possible. People who were silent begin to speak. People who were passive begin to move. Not because they were told to, but because someone had the courage to go first. That's the ripple effect. That's what leadership creates. And it doesn't require a title, a platform, or a spotlight. It requires a willingness to go when it would be easier to stay still. So the question comes back to this. What are you waiting for? The right time may never feel right. The perfect plan may never come together. The fear may never fully go away, but the opportunity is here now. In the decision to begin, in the choice to care enough to act, in the moment you stop outsourcing responsibility and start claiming it. You don't need permission, you don't need a map. You need to recognize that you are the one who has the capacity to make a difference, that you are not too late, that you are not too small, that the moment in front of you is not insignificant. It's yours, not in the future, not someday, now. And if you don't do it, someone else might. But they'll do it differently. They won't carry your voice, your story, your values. They'll carry theirs. The world needs what only you can bring. The longer you wait, the more that need goes unmet. Not because the world lacks solutions, but because it lacks people willing to believe they're the ones capable of delivering them.